everybody. Happy Aloha Day. I have a couple of things that I want to mention before I get started with chapters 4, 5, and 6. First of all, if you haven't turned in your syllabus, please make sure you do that ASAP. Same thing with getting a book. I think all of you have a book. If you don't, definitely need to get on that. And if you have any extra credit stuff that you want to give me, any classroom stuff, tissues, things like that. Sorry, it's early. I'll take those until next Friday, so you can bring pens, pencils, paper, Clorox wipes, anything like that. Your chapter questions are going to be due next Wednesday. That's the 9th. It'll be chapters 1 and 2, chapter 8, and these new ones, chapter 4, 5, and 6. All due probably, I'll say by midnight the night before for you guys, so that way they're all going to be due on the 9th. You also have a test Friday the 11th. It'll be chapters 1 through 8, not chapter 3 because we didn't cover it, and then chapter 7 is something we do later on. So chapters 1 and 2, chapters 4, 5, and 6, and chapter 8. It's only 25 questions. It's not very hard. I'm going to maybe put it in a Google form or something like that for you guys. I'm going to have to figure that out because, as you can probably tell, I'm technologically challenged. Which also brings me to my last point. I'm sorry about my late chapter 8 upload. I really thought that it was up there. Somebody emailed me last night looking for it, and they said, Ms. Hoffman, where is chapter 8? And I was like, been up there the whole week, and I've been telling you guys, just look at that video. I did not upload the video, or it didn't go all the way. I exited out before it finished uploading something, because I could have sworn I put it up there, and I didn't. So it's up there now. Going to update the website very soon to where you can see that on the same page. I'm just going to leave that on week 2 where it was supposed to be, and then this will be on week 3. So let's hop right into it. I'm just going to hit the high points of chapter 4. So the first thing he talks about is organization of your presentation. It depends on the purpose of your speech, and if you remember, we covered the purpose. It's the to verb. So an informative speech, the purpose is going to be to inform. Persuasive is to persuade, etc. They're very different, so you need to make sure you know what it is that you're trying to do before you actually start writing your speech. Because if you don't know what your speech is supposed to be about, then what's the point? You don't even know how to get started. So once you choose your purpose, then you can work on the organization of the speech. You're always going to want to begin with what's called an AGD. An attention, getting, or grabbing device. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in chapter 6. Your introduction is something that's going to establish your tone. So you want to make sure that it's very well written, that it's very well structured, and that it covers all of the things that the audience needs to know. The first thing in your paragraph that you need to work on, not necessarily the first thing that you need to say, is the thesis statement. Now, all of you are probably familiar with the thesis statement. You've written an English paper. There are generally 2 different types, and either one is okay. You're probably more familiar with what's called a 3-pronged thesis statement. That would be something like, this summer, I went to SeaWorld, Disney World, and Universal Studios. So you have the 3 things that you are talking about doing, your first, second, and third paragraph. You normally do them, in the same order you would talk about them. And that's perfectly acceptable. However, a 1-pronged thesis statement kind of gives a more general idea, and it would be something to the effect of, I had a lot of great adventures this summer, and I can't wait to share them with you. That's sort of telling the audience what is going to happen, but in one general statement instead of sectioning it out. Either one is fine. A lot of people prefer the 3-pronged thesis statement because it sort of helps the audience get a preview of what you're going to do. And we're going to talk about previews and reviews in a minute, but it kind of helps the audience to follow along. Oh, I know we're going to talk about this first, then we're going to talk about this second, and then that third. It is not just the general purpose statement, but it puts your purpose of your speech into a claim, what it is that you're going to do, what you're going to tell them. There are some examples in the book that he uses for 3 different types of speeches, and he uses the topic of computers for each one, so you can sort of see the difference in between them all, and those are all 1-pronged thesis statements, so you might want to check those out and just kind of see how they differ from informative to persuasive to demonstrative. Your thesis is the most important sentence in your entire speech. It's going to sort of tell the audience all about what they need to know. And then your body paragraphs expand. So your body paragraphs are the middle 3. If you're not familiar, you have 5 paragraphs in a speech. Your intro, your conclusion, and then your 3 body paragraphs. So if I ever ask you how many body paragraphs you have, it's normally going to be 2 or 3. not 5. People say, yeah, there are 5 body paragraphs in this. The intro and the conclusion do not count. Just the middle is meat and potatoes. You should never introduce any new information in the conclusion, and the introduction is sort of just like a little teaser to get them ready. I equate it to like a meal. Think about eating an appetizer. That kind of gets you ready to eat the rest of your meal. Then you have your whole big meal in the middle. Now, you don't want to heap on a big giant dessert after the fact. You got to eat something little, like some after dinner mints or, one of those little cups of gelato or something like that. And that is your conclusion, sort of kind of wrapping it all up at the end. You don't want to just overload the audience or anything like that. So the body of the speech is the majority of the presentation. It's going to include your info to help build on your thesis statement, and it's going to address some major issues. The biggest one is, why should the audience care? It's very important, because if your audience doesn't care, then they're not going to listen to you. Subdividing is super important. We don't like big giant walls of text. We don't like big giant metaphorical walls of speaking either. If you looked at the first page of a book and there were no indentions, there was like no spacing, and it was just text, 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 text all the way down, you would probably not read that book. You would probably shut it immediately and go, oh, I don't think I want to have anything to do with that. But when you open a book and you see paragraphs and you see spacing and you maybe see a picture here and there, it becomes more inviting. That is because our brains like to process chunks of information, and that's such a weird word, but it's a word that he uses in the book. You just don't want to overload your audience, like I was mentioning before. You want to give them a minute to digest the information. Going back to equating it to a meal, you don't just keep heaping on the information. You've got to let it slowly kind of trickle out so the audience can process it and then understand it. Because hearing, like I mentioned before, does not happen instantaneously. It is something that takes just a second to happen. But if you're overloading us with too much information, we can't concentrate on any one thing, and we're going to lose it all. If you give it to us slowly, a little bit at a time, we can go ahead and process that information in real time and understand. 3 body areas is going to be what we mostly do. There may be 2, because those are rooted in our cultural modes. We have lots of binaries in our life. Bi meaning 2, on and off, black and white, yes and no, male, female, those kinds of things. We also have a lot of trinities, tri meaning 3. Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, red, blue, and yellow primary colors, 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out. These are all things that he uses in the book as examples. Think about our phone numbers. Think about your social security number, your credit card number, 2s, 3s, and 4s. And it's all subdivided so that we can better understand it. Because if you just looked at a phone number and it was 10 digits all together, it's not going to look as friendly as 3, 3, 4. The audience is really only going to retain the major points of your speech anyway, so why not, make those major points well known. Patterns of organization, there are quite a few that you need to know. I'm on number 4 in the notes. First one's chronological. That has to do with time. It's going to either be past, present, future. It's really good for if you're doing a historical piece. So you're starting in the 1900s and going through history, talking about fashion or something like that. It can also be really good for informative speeches, because we like to think linearly. We're not great with bouncing back and forth and saying, well, tomorrow I'm going to do this, but 2 weeks ago I did this, and 6 months from now I'm going to do this, and that's just kind of ping-ponging around in our brain. If we go, tomorrow I'm going to do this, a week from now this is going to happen, a month from now this is going to happen, it makes much more sense to us. It's also good for demonstrative speeches, because you got to start with step 1 and end with step 10. The next one's spatial. You're not really ever going to use that one, but it's something that's according to position. Some examples he gives are geographical regions, so you start with 1 and then you move down to 5. Or a golf swing, you start with position 1, position 2, position 3, 4, 5, those kinds of things. Topical is the other most popular one, because it's really just a division into subtopics or classes. So what I did this summer, Disney World, SeaWorld, Universal, I didn't really do that. I wish I did. Excuse me. But it just kind of divides a broad concept. In this case, what I'm using for an example is summer vacation into 3 different things. Now, that may also be chronological. Maybe I did go to Disney World and then SeaWorld, and then last I went to Universal Studios. It could also be topical from what I liked most to least, or what I like least to most, or the most exciting, those kinds of things. So you can use different things in different areas of your speech. So the whole thing can be chronological, but then within each paragraph you have it in topics, or the whole thing's topical and then your paragraphs are chronological. Doesn't really matter. Causal patterns, problem cause solution patterns, those kinds of things. They are looking to explore problems. Causal patterns aren't seeking a solution, but problem cause solution, as it says in the name, is seeking a solution. Pro and con division shows both sides of an issue. That's for informative speeches only. You don't want to ever say the cons if you're trying to persuade someone to do something. So pro-con would be gathering information on a certain thing for a person to help them make an informed decision. If you worked for a company and your company needed to hire another, janitorial staff, it's your job to go out and say, well, there are these 3 companies and this is what's good about each of them, this is what's good or bad about each of them, and then help your boss make an informed decision. That's just a random thing I made up. There's also concession assertion, which is like a debate where one person says, I totally understand your point of view, but my point of view makes more sense. The next thing that's really important is called the motivated sequence. Now, whenever we're talking about this one, I want you to start thinking in the term of infomercials. He uses it as a example for speeches, but we're going to be using it more in the form of a presentation almost. So it was invented by Alan Monroe in the 1930s. Think about the latest infomercial you've seen. Slap Chop, ShamWow, Flex Tape, OxyClean, Scrub Daddy, as all the as seen on TV stuff. So there are 5 steps in those commercials that you may not have ever even noticed before. First step is to gain the audience's attention. The AGD is going to establish concern, the attention-getting device. It could be a loud noise. It might be really colorful. Most of the time, they're going to ask you a question. So they're going to say, have you ever had blah, blah, blah happen to you? Chances are you're going to be able to answer yes. That is how they get you. They get your attention by relating to you. The second thing they do is establish a need. So they show you the picture of the poor person in grayscale, and they're all sad because they can't do a thing that they're supposed to be able to do, like hold 17 items at once, and they drop them on the ground, and it says, oh, has this ever happened to you? Have you ever been embarrassed in public because you dropped all your groceries on the ground? So it's going to define the problem, show that the audience has something to lose or to gain, and cause more concern. Then the next step is going to be to satisfy the need. So it's going to say what can be done about this and give you a plan of action. So you're going to, I just realized that my notes cut off on that. Dang, I'm going to have to fix that for y'all, I'm sorry. It asks what can be done, and so it's going to help show you what it is excuse me, that you can do to help. That's when the picture gets all colorful and it's like, well, here's such and such product to help you out. Here's a grocery bag, The next step is visualizing results, which kind of brings you even past the solution into the future to show what your life is going to be like with this product. So that's when it shows, the happy family sitting at the table eating breakfast, and the mom is like, here, Timmy, I made your eggs with the microwave egg cooker. And Timmy's like, wow, thanks, Mom. You're the best mom ever. So you're getting to see what life would be like. And then the last step is requesting action. And what is the last thing they always ask you to do? Call now, buy it now, call within the next 10 minutes, and you could receive 6 of them for free. You'll get a 10% discount, anything like that. They're going to get you to do that. They're gonna, now that they've drug you in, they're gonna say, now buy it. If they just started with buy it now, then no one would ever buy it, because you're gonna say, don't tell me what to do, and you're gonna turn your TV off. But since they've caught you in this heightened state where you're interested now, you're paying attention, they're gonna capitalize on that and say, buy it. So that is the motivated sequence. Remember that for your test, you're going to have to put these steps in order. And then we will move on to chapter 5 in the next video, and I will cover chapter 6. All right, let's talk about chapter 5. So in chapter 5, he talks about how we write and speak differently. And it's very true, because if you've ever written an English paper, we tend to write very formally, and that's good. Like, it's supposed to sound really nice, but when you read it out loud, it tends to sound kind of robotic. So what we need to start working on is writing in an oral style. One of the best ways to do this is type of a whole paragraph, and then stop and actually physically read it out loud so that you can hear how it sounds. If you just read it in your head, it's probably going to sound okay, because our inside, our head voice, normally, just kind of makes sense of it and makes it sound good. I'm not saying that it's not good, but it makes more sense when we read, because we're used to reading more formally written things up here. So it's a conversation. We've had a discussion about that before in the basic model of communication, that speech is a two-way street. And so you need to converse with your audience, and you need to be more fluid, more adaptable, that kind of thing. Reading is a slower process. Not that anybody reads slowly here, but you can reread over and over, so you can take your time. However, whenever you're hearing a speech, it's a much faster thing. You're probably only going to hear that speech one time, and then it's over with. So your listening and your processing skills have to be a little bit higher, working higher at that point. That's why structural clarity, previews and reviews and transitions and things like that are very important for the audience. They need to know where you're going. They need to remember where you've been at that point. And transitions will help ease us from one thing to another. You don't want to say, I went to Disney World and rode the Pirates of the Caribbean ride. The dolphins at SeaWorld were great. Because then you're clashing two totally different things right there, and you have not prepared me at all. So if you just put a transition sentence in the middle, I rode the Pirates of the Caribbean ride at Disney World. Speaking of water, I'd like to go ahead and talk about SeaWorld. The dolphins at SeaWorld were my favorite thing. Boom, bridge the gap. So when writing your speech, again, use the oral style as much as possible, because the audience is not in your own head. You're up here, which means that you might be able to bridge some gaps automatically by just kind of having your own context. But a lot of people can't do that because they don't follow what you're saying. So you want to make sure you're reading it to somebody else to where they can say, yes, that makes sense. Think about, have you ever had a conversation with someone and then you think one part of the sentence, or you're thinking about a topic, and then all of a sudden out loud you go, I forgot that we really should have painted that purple. And they're like, what are you talking about? And you're like, oh my gosh, I'm sorry. I just had like a whole conversation in my head and spoke that part out loud. You may not have had that happen to you, but I do that all the time. So you have to help the audience along. Remember, we've said the audience is dumb. And it's not that, the people in the audience are dumb. It's just that we're not in your head. We can't process as quickly as you can. So break down difficult concepts, define difficult terms, and help us out. Ease us through it. Tips for effective language use. So define technical terms. Don't over-explain. Don't treat the audience like children. But, if you're talking about sports, all you have to do is say, that's the name of a play in football. And, okay, we understand that now. You don't have to go into detail of this is what it consists of, and this is when you do this, and this is how this person moves. You just need to say that's what it is, and I'll understand the context. Simplifying your sentence structure. Complex sentences are hard to say. It is not that you don't want to have super baby sentences where you say, I like the cat was nice, I pet the cat. That's a little bit too simplified, but your compound sentences and things like that have like 100 commas in them, you want to try to simplify them down a little bit so the audience can follow along better, and so you can make sure that you're hitting all the points and not getting confused. Again, we can always go back and read that sentence a third or fourth time if it's super long to understand what it is the author's trying to say, but the audience can't say, hang on, can you repeat that whole sentence? Because we don't have time for that, and then it would make you backtrack and disturb everybody else. Using humor where appropriate is always welcome. It needs to be appropriate humor where appropriate. Read your speech out loud. Listen for unnatural flow, those kinds of things, especially reading it to somebody else. The next section is on memorable language, and there's quite a few things that you can do in here to help create memorable language in your speech. The first examples he gives are from John F. Kennedy and Shakespeare. The first one is, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. That's called linguistic reversal. It's where you take one section and then flip-flop it in a different way. So ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. Then Shakespeare's is from Hamlet, to be or not to be, that is the question, so flip-flopped there. Martin Luther King had his I Have a Dream speech, and the repetition of I have a dream over and over helped to cement that in people's minds that that was not a reality at the time. He was dreaming about this. He was hoping that it could happen. So he said it over and over and over. And now you can't even think I have a dream without thinking of Martin Luther King. There are also a lot of different writing devices that you can use, and that is the next section that I have labeled vocabulary. It's not really, but it's something that you're going to want to know for matching. So assonance is the repetition of vowel sounds with different consonant sounds. So no pain, no gain. They both have the A sound, but different consonants, P and G. Consonance is the substitution of vowels within words that have the same consonant. So the next example is pine for your pain. So both P's, but different vowel sounds. The alliteration is the repetition of consonants at the beginning of words. So if you're familiar with tongue twisters, Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. He gives another example in there. Particular products purchased by pushy parents, I think is what it is. Simile is a comparison using like or as, so don't get it mixed up with a metaphor where they say something is something else. He gives weird examples on some of these, so I've put my own examples in the notes if you'll notice that. I used as white as snow. His is like words are like water or something like that. It's very strange. And hyperbole is an exaggeration in service of the truth, so you're trying to really help somebody understand just how big that fish you caught was. It was 8 feet long. It probably wasn't 8 feet long, but you're trying to make them understand that it was huge. An allusion is a reference to something in history, art, theater, literature, something like that somebody would understand. So if I'm talking about Hamlet, or if you've seen Hamilton, he writes the letter to Angelica, and he says something about this petty pace goes on from day to day, and he says, I trust you'll understand the allusion to another Scottish play or something like that, another Scottish tragedy. So he's alluding to Shakespeare. Imagery is using sense language, so something you can feel, taste, touch, see, or smell, how soft the blanket was, how bright the lights were, something like that. Irony is a discrepancy between what is said and meant. You don't want to use too much irony and fear that you're going to sound really sarcastic. If you ever heard the song Ironic by Alanis Morissette, none of that stuff is actually really ironic. Irony would be more like someone chooses to cheat on a big test, and then they go work super hard to not get caught. And then at the end of the day, the person giving the test is like, you know what, I think I'm not even going to give a grade for this. I'll just give you extra credit if you did it. And so, they worked super hard, and then it turns out they don't even need to do it. An oxymoron are two words or concepts that are opposites. So my examples were a big baby, jumbo shrimp, two things that are different. He gives another weird example that I didn't really like. I think he says like a giant of a microbe. Yeah, not great. And then, of course, the best way to use memorable language is to incorporate, or to make memorable language, is to incorporate language that's already been used. So we talked a little bit about the AGD. We're going to get that in Chapter 6. But using quotes, song lyrics, poems, something that somebody can relate to that is already famous is a great way to help people remember. All right, on to Chapter 6. All right, Chapter 6. So we're going to talk about the elements of the introduction and the elements of the conclusion, because those are two things that are structured very differently than your body paragraphs. And we're going to talk about previews and reviews as well. So the attention-getting device, we covered that a little bit. It can be a lot of things. It can be a startling statistic, a quote, song lyrics, a fact, a story. In fact, if you start a story at the beginning of your speech, you can do what's called in media res. Some of you may have heard of that before. If you haven't, it basically means in the middle. Best example somebody gave me yesterday was the movie Ratatouille. If you've seen that movie, it starts with him jumping out the window, and then it's like, I wonder, I'm sure you're wondering how I got here, or something like that. You're starting the story in the middle to really catch the audience's attention, and then they're hooked. And then, you kind of go back and explain after the fact. So if you start a book and it's like, hello, my name is so-and-so, I have brown hair, I have brown eyes, I'm 20 years old, blah, 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 it gets, kind of droning on and on. But if you opened a book and it started with, I was running through the woods, I was scared for my life, I could hear breathing behind me, then you're like, ooh, I want to read that book a little bit more. You're more interested in it. So don't be afraid to start with a story. There are quite a few elements of the introduction. First one's AGD, covered that. The link is the next sentence. It's going to make your AGD make sense. If it doesn't, why did you even say it? Why does it pertain to the speech that you're giving? Oh, throat's getting so dry. This is not the best thing for me to be drinking right now, but it'll get me through it. So ties your AGD to the subject and identifies the relevance of your opening line. Why would you say you were running through the woods if you were doing a speech on how to make a cake? It wouldn't make any sense. But if you go with, I was running through the woods, someone was chasing me, I was so scared. But then you go to, don't worry, I'm just kidding. We were playing flashlight tag, or something like that, or I was just at summer camp. Then you can go on from there to tell everyone, what you did this summer. That was just one of the cool things I did this summer. It was played flashlight tag in summer camp. So it's linking it together. The common ground is the next thing, and that is a relationship between you, the audience, and the subject. So you don't want to alienate anyone in your audience. You want everyone to understand in the same way. So it could be a simple statement like, even if you've never been to summer camp, I'm sure that you've ran around in the woods before, or something like that. That's kind of a lame one, but you're trying to establish a connection between everybody. The audience can also understand why this is important to them. A significant statement you're probably not going to ever use. It's a support or research or something like that, and we're not really going to do any research stuff. Your thesis then goes next, main idea, one statement, a preview, which is like a verbal outline of the speech, and it's going to prepare the audience for what they're about to hear. Now that's important because it can also be your thesis statement. It's, travel with me while I go get another bottle of water. It is something that you can interchange. The introduction is so flexible, and I want you to really understand that because I don't want you to feel like you have to get stuck in one concrete thing to where, everyone's writing their introduction the exact same way every time. What you need to think about is how it's going to work best for you. So your preview is a verbal outline. So your preview can be a 3-pronged thesis statement. It can be, you could do your main thesis statement, and then you could do, this summer I went to X, Y, and Z. It doesn't have to be anything more than that. It prepares the audience for what they're about to hear, and it kind of helps them to know what's happening first, second, third. So your thesis and your preview can be the same thing, or you can do a 1-pronged thesis statement and then a preview. Then you transition to the body because it bridges the gap and it helps you not jump from one section to another. Previews and reviews, we talked about the preview. It's a verbal table of contents. The audience can track their progress in the speech, so they know if you're on SeaWorld, then you're on the 2nd paragraph. If you're on Universal, you're on the 3rd paragraph. Shows your organization and structure and can help you with the mood of your overall speech. A review comes at the end, and it's going to help the audience to understand these major ideas that you've been talking about and sort of remind them. If you're talking, the audience can only remember so much. They're going to start forgetting the beginning of your speech. If you come back at the end and you do your review, the audience is going to be like, oh yeah, that's what they talked about 5 minutes ago at the beginning of their speech. He gives you some examples. Whoops, Daisy's knocking everything over. He gives you some examples here of ways that you can sort of organize your speech and do your previews. The first thing is a mnemonic device. It can be used for ease of memory. So he uses 4 words that start with C in there that kind of help the audience to get it. The alliteration is the sound similarity, so he uses studentus sleepidimus and a couple other examples in the book that have the same letter. And then anaphora is to repeat main phrases. He uses unemployment harms as a way to really get that in there. Unemployment harms this, unemployment harms us, unemployment harms businesses. The preview should include the thesis or refer to it, which again can be the same thing. And the preview provides a sense of range of the speech. So where are we going? Hi guys, small interruption. I forgot to include this in the introduction section, so I'm adding this in after the fact. Whenever you are writing your introduction, do not forget to actually introduce yourself. So somewhere in that introductory paragraph, you want to say, my name is so-and-so, and this is what I'm going to talk about, or something to that effect. The best thing about introducing yourself is that it can be pretty fluid, and that can kind of go anywhere as well in the intro, as long as it sounds natural. So it can come after your link, it can come after your common ground. You want it to come before your thesis most of the time. So sometimes you could say, my name is Ms. Hoffman, and today I want to speak to you about blah, 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 or my name is Ms. Hoffman, and I'm going to share my exciting summer with you, something like that, so you can kind of add it together or throw it in a different section. So whenever you look at my practice example, you can kind of see that I threw my introduction in right before my thesis, but it can sort of happen wherever, as long as it's after the AGD in that first line. Hope that makes sense. The conclusion also has a structure. Golly, I can't talk this morning. Conclusion is there to leave the audience with a strong impression. Remember, we want to make an impression sandwich. Good impression, speech, good impression, all together. So refer back to the intro to complete the story, structural summary. He's got some examples in the book if you want to look in there. I didn't really go over it in class. It's just something that you can use for further help. So look at the elements of the conclusion. Y'all have been talking so much, my throat is so dry. Transition from the body section. Again, you don't want to just hop right back in there, otherwise you're going to have some issues. Reminder of the topic and thesis, a structural review, a link back to the introduction, and then an ending line. The link can include the AGD, and the ending line should provide a sense of finality. Give the audience some closure, help them out, make it hopeful. It should end nicely. And then, of course, say thank you at the end. That's how I will know that you are done. It's a good verbal cue for everyone. The audience, me, because I may not always be looking up at you. I might be writing, and so when you say thank you, I'll know you're done. Stop your time, finish writing up, get the next person up there. Structural review is just like the preview. You're just going back and saying, I talked about this, this, and this. If you want to look at some examples of an intro and a conclusion, I actually have some up on the website in Google Classroom, color-coded, so you can see each part of them. That's pretty much it. I think it's 4, 5, and 6. Make sure you do your questions. Turn those all in by next Wednesday. Hopefully my throat won't be as scratchy by then, and I won't have to be guzzling a whole bottle of water. And again, hopefully I can see all of you guys soon. I hope you're doing well, and yeah. Have a great long weekend, and I'll talk to you again probably Wednesday or Thursday. I'll have the next one up, and we'll talk about speech writing. Bye.